The frigid Montana rain hammered down on Evergreen Tactical Institute's training grounds like liquid ice, turning the muddy terrain into a treacherous swamp that sucked at boots with each labored step. Alexis Fletcher lay sprawled in the cold. Muck, her mouth filled with the coppery taste of blood, mixed with dirt as crimson drops from her split lip stained the ground beneath her. Above her, Trevor Reynolds' imposing shadow blocked out the gray sky, his combat boot positioned for another devastating kick. "Get up, Fletcher," he barked, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. "We're not finished with your combat assessment yet." The circle of trainees surrounding them erupted in cruel laughter, their voices echoing off the concrete walls of the obstacle course like wolves closing in on wounded prey. Alexis could hear Stephanie Warren's high-pitched giggle mixing with the deeper tones of male recruits. Even some of the second-year operatives had abandoned their own exercises to witness the daily humiliation of Delta Team's most pathetic failure. "Maybe she needs a different kind of training facility," called out Connor Phillips, a broad-shouldered recruit from Seattle whose mother held some high-ranking FBI position that afforded her son unlimited arrogance. "I hear there's a nice yoga studio in town. Lots of stretching and meditation." More laughter rippled through the crowd as Alexis pushed herself up on her elbows, her ribs screaming in protest where Trevor's boot had connected with surgical precision. She was impossibly small compared to these specimens of tactical breeding. Barely 5'4", and maybe 125 pounds soaking wet. Next to these genetically gifted future operatives, she looked like a child playing dress-up in oversized tactical gear. "Come on, princess," Trevor sneered, reaching down to grab her by the collar of her uniform. "Show us those killer moves they supposedly taught you. Where was it again?" "Some community college security program." As his hand closed around her collar, Alexis's body responded with muscle memory that ran deeper than conscious thought. Her right hand twitched toward his wrist, fingers automatically positioning for a grip that would shatter the small bones there. Her left hand started to rise toward the pressure point just below his ear, a strike that would drop him unconscious in seconds. For just one moment, her eyes went completely flat and cold, displaying the dead stare of someone who had seen more combat than everyone in this training facility combined. Then she caught herself. Alexis forced her hands to remain limp, made herself whimper pathetically as Trevor hauled her to her feet. She stumbled deliberately, playing up the weakness even, as every trained instinct screamed at her to end this humiliation with swift, brutal efficiency. "Pathetic," Trevor muttered, shoving her backward with enough force to send her tumbling. Alexis let herself fall again, landing hard on her tailbone while suppressing the combat reflexes that could have turned the fall into a tactical roll. "I don't know what strings your uncle pulled to get you into Evergreen, but this isn't some participation trophy summer camp. This is where we forge the next generation of America's elite tactical operators." He gestured grandly to the assembled trainees, most of whom nodded along with his speech like disciples receiving wisdom from their prophet. These weren't ordinary law enforcement students. Evergreen only accepted the absolute best candidates. The children of federal agents and military officers, the future leaders of America's most elite tactical units. Alexis had memorized all their files during her preparation for this mission. Trevor Reynolds, son of General Michael Reynolds, decorated veteran of multiple conflicts and current Joint Special Operations Advisor. Stephanie Warren, daughter of Director Elaine Warren, current head of intelligence operations for a classified agency. Connor Phillips, whose mother controlled half the special operations training protocols in the Northwest through her position at the FBI. And then there was Alexis Fletcher, supposedly the niece of a small-town sheriff from Idaho here on some kind of merit scholarship that nobody could quite explain or verify. "You know what I think?" Trevor continued, circling her like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. "I think you're a mistake, a clerical error. Someone in admissions probably mixed up your file with someone who actually deserves to be here. Alexis kept her eyes downcast, playing the role of the defeated victim, but she was cataloging everything with the precision of a trained operative. The way Trevor favored his right leg, old sports injury, probably from his college days. The slight tremor in Stephanie's hands that suggested stimulant abuse to maintain her perfect scores. The expensive watch on Connor's wrist that was way beyond any trainee's budget, indicating outside financial support that raised questions about loyalty. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Instructor Winters watching from the edge of the training grounds. Staff Sergeant Emily Winters, former Army Ranger with deployments in multiple conflict zones. Her gray eyes fixed on Alexis with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Unlike the other instructors who seemed content to let the trainees establish their own brutal hierarchy, Winters was studying her, analyzing her every movement. That level of scrutiny was dangerous for someone trying to maintain deep cover. "Maybe we should help her pack," suggested Stephanie, her voice dripping with false sweetness that barely concealed the cruelty underneath. "I'm sure there's a nice desk job somewhere that would be perfect for someone with her limited skill set." The laughter started again, but Alexis noticed that not everyone was joining in with the same enthusiasm. Olivia Martinez, her assigned bunkmate, stood at the edge of the crowd with a troubled expression clouding her features. A few of the other trainees looked genuinely uncomfortable with the level of cruelty on display. Good. She could work with that kind of decency when the time came. Alexis slowly pushed herself to her feet, making sure to wince and favor her left side, where she'd taken the hardest hits. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand, leaving a red smear across her pale skin that would serve as visible evidence of the abuse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind that carried the scent of pine and diesel fuel from the vehicle pool. "I'll try harder tomorrow." Trevor laughed, a sound like breaking glass that sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened trainees. "Tomorrow? Sweetheart, if you can't handle basic hand-to-hand combat training, what makes you think you'll survive advanced tactical operations, or weapons training, or psychological warfare exercises?" Alexis met his eyes for just a moment, and something flickered there. A flash of something dark and dangerous that made Trevor take an involuntary step backward. But then it was gone, replaced by the watery, defeated look of someone who was clearly in over her head. "I just thought, I want to serve my country," she said, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. The trainees exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes at what they perceived as pathetic desperation. But Instructor Winters stepped forward, her boots squelching in the mud with military precision. "All right, show's over," she called out, her voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Reynolds, Warren, Phillips, you've got equipment maintenance duty. The rest of you hit the showers. Mess hall opens in 30 minutes. As the crowd dispersed, Winters approached Alexis with deliberate slowness. She kept her head down, playing the part of the humiliated victim, but she could feel Winters' eyes boring into her like laser beams. "Fletcher," she said quietly, using her cover surname. Word. Alexis's pulse quickened, but she nodded meekly. "Yes, ma'am." Winters waited until the other trainees were completely out of earshot before speaking again, her weathered face unreadable as carved stone. "That was quite a fall you took there. I'm sorry, ma'am. I know I need to work on my balance." "Balance?" Winters repeated the word slowly, like she was tasting something bitter. "Funny thing about balance, Fletcher. Most people, when they fall, they put their hands out to catch themselves. Natural reflex, but you fell like someone who's been trained to take a hit, like someone who knows how to distribute impact to minimize damage." Alexis's blood turned to ice water in her veins, but she kept her expression completely blank. "I don't understand, ma'am." Winters studied her for a long moment, her weathered face revealing nothing of her thoughts. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Maybe not. But I'll be watching you, Fletcher." Something tells me there's more to you than meets the eye. As Winters walked away, Alexis allowed herself a small, satisfied smile hidden from view. Let her watch. By the time she figured out what she was really looking at, it would be far too late for her or anyone else involved in this conspiracy. The game had officially begun, and Alexis Fletcher was about to remind everyone why Shadow Protocol operatives were the most effective tactical specialists in the world. 3 weeks had passed since Alexis's humiliating introduction to Evergreen Tactical Institute, and her reputation as the facility's most spectacular failure had only solidified into something approaching legend among the trainees. During morning physical training, she consistently finished dead last in every run, her small frame apparently unable to keep pace with the genetically gifted specimens around her. In weapons training, she fumbled with rifle assembly so badly that Instructor Garcia had to demonstrate the same basic procedure 4 separate times. During tactical simulations, she made rookie mistakes that got her entire team eliminated within minutes of mission start. Fletcher did it again, Stephanie Warren whispered loudly during breakfast, making absolutely sure her voice carried across the mess hall. I heard she actually cried during yesterday's interrogation resistance training. Actually cried. Like tears and everything. The table erupted in snickers and barely suppressed laughter. Alexis sat alone at the far end of the hall, mechanically spooning oatmeal into her mouth while staring at her tray with the defeated posture of someone barely hanging on to their last thread of hope. Her shoulders were hunched in defeat, her uniform wrinkled and slightly too large for her frame. To anyone watching, she looked like someone who would wash out within days. What they couldn't see was the micro camera hidden in her collar button, recording every conversation within a 30-foot radius. They had no idea that her clumsy stumble near the officer's table yesterday had allowed her to plant a listening device under their usual seats. And they certainly didn't know that her pathetic performance in computer training had given her unsupervised access to terminals for nearly 20 minutes at a time. I actually feel bad for her, Olivia Martinez said quietly, glancing over at Alexis's isolated table with genuine concern in her voice. Olivia was Alexis's bunkmate, a genuinely kind woman from New Mexico whose father was a decorated Marine. Colonel, maybe we should, don't. Trevor cut her off sharply, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The weak don't survive here, Martinez. The sooner Fletcher learns that harsh reality, the better it'll be for everyone involved. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Besides, I heard from a very reliable source that she's not even supposed to be here. Alexis's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. This was new information. Potentially valuable intelligence that hadn't appeared in any of her briefing materials. What do you mean? Connor Phillips asked, leaning forward with the eager expression of someone who lived for gossip. Trevor glanced around dramatically, ensuring he had everyone's complete attention before continuing in a stage whisper. My father knows someone high up in admissions. Apparently, Fletcher's file just appeared overnight about a month before the semester started. No prior tactical academy applications, no family military history, no athletic achievements worth mentioning. Just poof, suddenly, she's accepted to the most elite tactical training facility in the entire country. That's impossible, Stephanie protested, her voice rising with indignation. The waiting list for Evergreen is 2 years long minimum. My mother had to call in multiple favors just to get me considered for admission. Exactly my point, Trevor replied, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction at having insider knowledge. Which means either someone very powerful wanted her here, or someone made a very expensive mistake that's about to be corrected. Alexis filed this information away while maintaining her dejected posture. Her insertion into Evergreen had been handled by Shadow Protocol's best forgers and hackers, professionals who could rewrite reality itself when necessary. But apparently, their work hadn't been quite perfect enough to fool everyone who mattered. That was definitely concerning and would need to be reported to her handlers immediately. The conversation was interrupted by the sharp blast of the morning assembly whistle. Trainees began filing out of the mess hall toward the parade grounds for their daily inspection and briefing, but Alexis deliberately lagged behind, pretending to struggle with organizing her tray and personal items. As the hall emptied of witnesses, she made her move with practiced precision. The kitchen staff was busy preparing for lunch service, giving Alexis a clear path to the service corridors that ran beneath the main building like a hidden circulatory system. She had memorized the facility's blueprints during her mission preparation, including the sections that weren't included on any official architectural plans. Evergreen had been built on the site of a Cold War-era communications bunker, and some of the old infrastructure remained intact, providing perfect routes for someone who needed to move unseen, moving with practiced silence that came from years of specialized training. Alexis slipped through a maintenance door and into the tunnel system. Here, away from cameras and witnesses, her entire demeanor changed instantly. The hunched shoulders straightened into perfect military posture. The uncertain gait became fluid and predatory. The lost little girl vanished completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. She had exactly 42 minutes before her absence would be noticed and reported. Alexis's first destination was the administration building's main server room. It hummed behind reinforced doors, the security here. Military grade. Biometric scanners, motion detectors, pressure-sensitive floors designed to detect even the slightest unauthorized presence. For a normal intruder, penetration would be absolutely impossible. Alexis wasn't normal by any definition of the word. She produced a small device from a hidden pocket in her uniform, a piece of technology that officially didn't exist in any government inventory. The biometric scanner read her fingerprints as belonging to Dr. Sarah Blackwood, the facility's head of information systems. The device had cost Shadow Protocol 3 months of surveillance and a carefully orchestrated accident that had allowed them to lift Blackwood's prints from her coffee mug. Inside the server room, Alexis worked with mechanical precision. She wasn't here to steal data that would leave traces that could be detected during routine security sweeps. Instead, she was installing monitoring software that would piggyback on the facility's own systems, completely invisible to standard detection protocols. Every email, every file transfer, every database query would now be automatically copied to a secure server farm in Virginia. 27 minutes remaining. Her next target was Director Harrington's office, 3 floors up and protected by an entirely different set of security measures. Alexis moved through the building's ventilation system like a ghost, her small size allowing her to navigate spaces that would be impossible for larger operatives. She had performed this kind of infiltration dozens of times before in places far more dangerous than a tactical training facility. Harrington's office was a treasure trove of classified information. Personnel files, training schedules, communication logs with federal officials. Alexis photographed everything with a camera. No bigger than a shirt button, her movements economical and absolutely silent. But it was what she discovered in Harrington's personal safe that made her blood run cold. Financial records, bank transfers, payments to offshore accounts that had no legitimate explanation whatsoever. James Harrington, the decorated federal agent and facility director, was selling secrets to someone. But to whom? And more importantly, how deep did this corruption run through the facility's command structure? 15 minutes remaining. Alexis was preparing to extract when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots moving with military precision. She froze, listening intently to the pattern. 2 people, both male based on stride length and weight distribution. One was definitely Harrington. She had memorized his distinctive gait during her first week of observation. The other footsteps were unfamiliar, but equally purposeful. "We can't afford any more delays," Harrington was saying as they approached his office, his voice tight with stress. "The buyers are getting impatient, and impatient buyers tend to make dangerous decisions." "The merchandise is delicate," replied the second voice, which Alexis now recognized as belonging to Instructor Bradley. "One mistake and we lose everything, including our heads." Alexis's mind raced with implications. Bradley was involved too. The conspiracy was deeper than she had initially suspected. How many others were compromised? How far up did the corruption reach? The door handle turned. Alexis had perhaps 3 seconds before they entered the office and discovered her presence. A normal person would be trapped, caught red-handed with classified documents spread across the desk. But Alexis had been trained by the most elite tactical specialists in the world. She moved like liquid shadow, flowing silently across the room and up the wall to a position above the doorframe. Her body pressed against the ceiling tiles, weight distributed across multiple support beams to avoid triggering any pressure sensors. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to minimize even the slightest sound. Harrington and Bradley entered below her, completely unaware of the predator hanging mere inches above their heads, listening to every word they spoke. "The Fletcher girl is becoming a significant problem," Bradley said, settling into a chair across from Harrington's desk with obvious familiarity. "She's not what she appears to be. Her reactions are all wrong." Alexis's blood turned to ice as she realized they were discussing her specifically. "What do you mean?" Harrington asked, moving to his safe with practiced ease. "Her failures are too perfect, too calculated. And today, during combat training, I saw something that bothered me considerably." Bradley leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "When Reynolds grabbed her, she started to move into a defensive position I've only seen described in classified Special Forces manuals. Then she caught herself and played the victim." Harrington paused, his hand frozen on the safe door. "You think she's federal intelligence?" "I think she's something much worse than standard federal intelligence," Bradley replied grimly. "The way she moves when she thinks no one is watching. I've seen that kind of training before. Black operations, deep cover specialists, elite tactical units." His voice dropped even further. "What if she's here investigating us specifically?" The two men stared at each other for a long tension-filled moment. Finally, Harrington spoke with deadly calm. "Then we eliminate the problem tonight, permanently." Alexis remained perfectly still as they discussed the specific details of her planned murder. They would make it look like an accident, a training mishap perhaps, or a suicide brought on by the overwhelming stress of institute life. Bradley knew the perfect location, an abandoned section of the obstacle course where accidental deaths had been discovered before. After they left, Alexis dropped silently to the floor, her mind already shifting into combat mode. Her cover was blown, but she had learned something invaluable in return. The corruption at Evergreen wasn't just about selling tactical secrets to foreign governments. It was about selling something they called merchandise, something delicate and valuable enough to kill for without hesitation. She had to get word to her handlers immediately. But first, she had to survive the night and the professional killers who would be hunting her. As Alexis slipped back through the ventilation system, she allowed herself a cold, predatory smile. Harrington and Bradley thought they were hunting a frightened little girl who had stumbled into something beyond her understanding. They had no idea. They had just declared war on a ghost who specialized in making people disappear forever. The abandoned storage facilities on the eastern edge of Evergreen Tactical Institute stood like ghostly sentinels in the pale moonlight, their concrete walls weathered by decades of Montana winters. Built as munitions bunkers during the Cold War, they had been officially decommissioned after a structural assessment deemed them unsafe for regular use. Unofficially, they were the perfect place to stage accidents for problems that required permanent solutions. Alexis moved through the shadowed corridors at 11:42 p.m., her military-grade night vision goggles, turning the pitch-black maze into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and tactical opportunities. She had been here for nearly 20 minutes, setting her trap with the methodical precision of someone who had orchestrated similar scenarios dozens of times before. Pressure plates hidden under loose floorboards. Trip wires connected to military-grade. Flashbang grenades. A dozen different ways to incapacitate anyone foolish enough to come hunting for her in this concrete tomb. But as she crouched behind a collapsed support beam, checking her watch for the third time in 2 minutes, Alexis knew something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. Harrington and Bradley should have arrived by now, according to the timeline. She had overheard. Their plan had been brutally simple: lure her here with a fake emergency message supposedly from Olivia, then stage a tragic accident in the structurally unstable building. Clean, untraceable, tragic. Instead, she heard footsteps approaching from 3 different directions simultaneously. Alexis's blood chilled as she recognized the tactical formation. This wasn't a simple murder carried out by 2 corrupt facility officials. This was a coordinated military operation being executed by trained professionals. Through her encrypted earpiece, she could hear whispered communications between at least 6 different operators moving through the building with textbook precision. Echo 1 in position, north corridor secured. Echo 2, east stairwell clear. No contacts. Echo 3, basement access point confirmed. Clear. These weren't Institute instructors playing at being soldiers. These were real operators, special forces professionals with combat experience and advanced training. Alexis pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the pieces of a much larger puzzle fell into place with terrifying clarity. The merchandise that Harrington and Bradley had discussed wasn't classified information or stolen tactical technology. It was people. Specifically, it was her. Somehow, someone with significant resources and intelligence capabilities had figured out that a Shadow Protocol operative was embedded at Evergreen Institute, and they had set an elaborate trap that went far beyond the capabilities of 2 corrupt facility officials. Target should be in the central chamber, based on our intelligence, came Bradley's voice through her intercepted communications. Remember, we need her alive and functional. The buyers want to know everything she knows about Shadow Protocol operations before we dispose of her. Alexis's jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. Shadow Protocol's existence was the most closely guarded secret in the American covert operations community. If foreign intelligence agencies had discovered the identity of one of their operatives, they wouldn't simply kill her quickly. They would torture every piece of classified intelligence out of her first. The locations of safe houses, the identities of other operatives, the details of ongoing missions around the globe. Thousands of American lives hung in the balance, and she was the key that could unlock all of it. She had to escape this trap immediately and get word to her handlers. Every second she remained here increased the danger to her fellow operatives. Alexis began moving toward the south exit, the one route that appeared clear of hostile forces according to her surveillance. But as she rounded a corner with practiced stealth, she found herself face to face with Trevor Reynolds. Except this wasn't the arrogant Institute trainee who had been tormenting her for weeks. Trevor held a military-grade assault rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had used similar weapons in actual combat situations. His expensive watch, the one that had seemed out of place for a trainee's budget, suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't purchased with Daddy's money. It was payment for services rendered to foreign handlers. The Institute star trainee was a foreign intelligence asset, probably embedded for years. "Hello, Alexis," Trevor said softly, his weapon trained on her center mass with professional competence. Or should I say Lieutenant Fletcher of Shadow Protocol? Alexis kept her hands clearly visible, her posture non-threatening despite every combat instinct screaming at her to strike first and ask questions later. "I don't know what you're talking about, Trevor." Trevor laughed, but there was no humor. In the sound, only cold professionalism. The helpless little girl act was genuinely impressive. I'll give you that much credit. You had me completely fooled for weeks, but my handlers are extremely thorough professionals. They've been tracking shadow protocol operations for years, waiting patiently for an opportunity exactly like this one. Your handlers? Alexis asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. Russian SVR, Trevor replied with obvious pride. I've been embedded here since I was 17 years old, building my cover identity, establishing my reputation, waiting for something truly valuable to fall into my lap. His smile was predatory and cold. Imagine my surprise when one of America's most classified operatives walked right through the front gates of my institute. Alexis's mind raced through tactical options with computer-like efficiency. The corridor was narrow, giving her extremely limited room to maneuver. Trevor was positioned perfectly with clear lines of fire and multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated. He had been trained well by professionals who understood exactly what they were dealing with. But he was making one critical mistake. He was talking instead of shooting. How did you figure it out? Alexis asked, taking a small step forward. That would appear to be nervous fidgeting to an untrained observer. In reality, she was positioning herself for a potential strike. Your combat simulation performance last week was the final piece of evidence we needed, Trevor replied, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph. Those techniques you use don't exist in any standard tactical training manual. My handlers ran the footage through their extensive databases and got a positive match. Techniques used by a shadow protocol operative in Syria 3 years ago. Trevor's eyes glittered with satisfaction and barely contained excitement. An operative who was supposedly killed in action, according to all official records. Except here you are, very much alive and playing dress-up at a tactical institute. Another step. Alexis was now within striking distance, but she needed him distracted for just a few more seconds. So what's the plan now? She asked. Torture you for classified information, eventually, Trevor admitted with disturbing casualness. But first, we're going to have some fun. You see, I've been taking orders and abuse from instructors and fellow trainees for 4 long years, building my cover identity. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been pretending to be some spoiled American military brat? Trevor's voice carried genuine anger now, the first real emotion he had displayed. I think it's time for some well-deserved payback before we get down to serious business. He gestured with his rifle toward a side chamber that Alexis knew would be perfect for an interrogation. Move slowly and keep your hands where I can see them. Alexis nodded meekly and began to turn as instructed, then exploded into motion with blindingly devastating speed. Her left hand swept upward to deflect the rifle barrel while her right hand drove toward Trevor's throat in a strike designed to crush his windpipe. But Trevor was faster and better trained than she had anticipated. Professionals who knew exactly what shadow protocol operatives were capable of had prepared him for this exact scenario. He twisted away from her strike with fluid grace and brought the rifle butt around toward her head in a counterattack that would have killed a normal person. Alexis ducked under the blow and drove her knee toward his solar plexus, but Trevor caught her leg and used her own momentum to slam her against the concrete wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded across her vision as her head connected with the rough surface, and she tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. Not bad at all, Trevor panted, pressing the rifle barrel against her neck with enough pressure to restrict her breathing. But I've been training specifically to fight shadow protocol operatives for 2 years. My handlers showed me hours of footage demonstrating your techniques, your preferred strikes, your tactical weaknesses. Alexis tasted more blood but managed to speak. Weaknesses? You're too small, too light for sustained combat, Trevor explained with clinical detachment. In a straight fight against someone with equal training but superior size, you lose every single time. The only reason Shadow Protocol operatives are effective is surprise and superior equipment. Take those advantages away, and you're just another soldier. Alexis met his eyes and smiled, blood staining her teeth red in a grin that would have terrified anyone with sense. You're absolutely right about one thing, Trevor. In a straight fight, I would lose eventually. Trevor frowned, sensing something wrong in her tone and body language. Good thing I never fight fair, Alexis added conversationally. The explosion came from the pressure plate Alexis had triggered when she stepped into the corridor, not the one under her feet, but the one she had positioned exactly 3 steps behind Trevor's current position. Time to detonate precisely. 90 seconds after activation, the blast wasn't designed to kill, just to disorient and create the chaos she needed to turn the tables. Trevor spun toward the sound, his professional training taking over, and Alexis struck with lethal precision. Her hand found the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, a pressure point that would paralyze his right arm for several minutes. As his rifle clattered to the floor, Alexis's other hand drove into his kidney with surgical accuracy. Trevor dropped to his knees, gasping in pain and shock as Alexis retrieved his weapon and checked the chamber, fully loaded with military-grade ammunition. Definitely not standard Institute equipment. You made another critical mistake, Alexis said conversationally, keeping the rifle trained on Trevor as he struggled to breathe. You assumed I was here alone. Trevor looked up at her with confusion and growing fear clouding his features. Shadow Protocol never operates solo on foreign soil, Alexis continued, her smile cold as winter death. My partner has been watching this entire time, feeding me intelligence through encrypted channels. He's the one who told me about the pressure plate timing. He's also the one currently eliminating your backup team. As if summoned by her words, the sound of gunfire echoed through the abandoned building. Short, controlled bursts followed by ominous silence. Professional work executed with mechanical precision. You see, Trevor, Alexis continued, the Russians aren't the only ones who've been planning this operation for years. We've known about the security leaks at Evergreen for months. My mission was never just to identify the traitors. It was to roll up the entire enemy network. Trevor tried to speak but only managed a strangled whisper. Don't worry, Alexis said, kneeling down beside him with false sympathy. You'll live long enough to tell us everything you know about your handlers. Their names, their locations, their other embedded assets. Alexis's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because here's something you should understand about Shadow Protocol operatives, Trevor. We don't just kill people. We make them disappear so completely that their own mothers forget they ever existed. The gunfire had stopped completely. In the distance, Alexis could hear footsteps approaching, measured, professional, familiar. And sometimes, she added with genuine warmth, we make them wish they'd never been born. Trevor's eyes widened in absolute terror as he finally understood what he had stumbled into. He hadn't captured a Shadow Protocol operative who was operating alone and vulnerable. He had walked directly into a Shadow Protocol trap that had been months in the making. 2 days later, Alexis sat in Olivia's room, carefully applying concealer to the bruises on her face. The official story was that she had tripped during a night training exercise and fallen down a flight of stairs. The unofficial reality was far more complex. You know, you don't have to keep going through with this, Olivia said quietly, watching Alexis prepare for another day of deliberate failure and humiliation. After what happened to Trevor, maybe they'll ease up on you. The Institute was buzzing with rumors about Trevor Reynolds' sudden disappearance. The official explanation was that he had been recalled to attend to a family emergency, but whispered conversations in the hallways suggested something far more sinister. Some said he had cracked under the pressure. Others believed he had been expelled for violating some unspecified rule. No one knew the truth, that he was currently in a black site facility being interrogated by professionals who specialized in extracting information from resistant subjects. That's not how this works, Alexis replied, carefully maintaining her cover persona of the struggling trainee. People like Stephanie and Connor, they need someone to feel superior to. If it's not me, it'll be someone else. Olivia frowned, her kind face troubled by the casual cruelty she witnessed daily. It's not right. The instructor should step in more often. Alexis shrugged, seemingly resigned to her fate. That's not how the real world works either. Nobody's coming to save you out there. You have to learn to save yourself. Or, she thought silently, you need to have an entire covert operations team backing you up. The truth was, Alexis had been anything but alone during her time at Evergreen. Shadow Protocol had inserted 4 other operatives into various positions throughout the facility: a maintenance worker, a cafeteria cook, an administrative assistant, and even one of the night security guards. All of them were highly trained professionals who had been feeding her intelligence and providing backup for months. And after the incident with Trevor, the operation had shifted into its next phase. No longer was Alexis simply gathering intelligence. Now she was actively manipulating the environment, carefully steering events toward their inevitable conclusion. "Come on," she said to Olivia, standing up and adjusting her deliberately ill-fitting uniform. "We're going to be late for morning PT." Outside, the Montana morning was crisp and clear, the air so sharp it felt like breathing knives. The training ground was already filled with trainees performing their warm-up exercises under the watchful eyes of the instructors. Alexis spotted Stephanie and Connor standing with a group of their usual followers, all of them casting occasional glances in her direction. "Look who decided to show up," Stephanie called out as Alexis approached. "Feeling better after your little accident, Fletcher? Or did you just need some time to cry it out?" The group laughed on cue, but Alexis noticed that the laughter was thinner than before, less certain. Trevor's unexplained disappearance had created a subtle undercurrent of unease throughout the Institute. If someone as seemingly perfect as Trevor could vanish overnight, was anyone truly safe? "Just trying to keep up," Alexis replied meekly, keeping her eyes downcast in a perfect display of submission. "Well, try harder," Connor snapped, stepping closer with obvious intimidation in his stance. "Some of us actually deserve to be here." Before Alexis could respond, Instructor Winters appeared, her weathered face set in its usual expressionless mask. "Line up," she barked, and the trainees scrambled to form ranks with military precision. Alexis took her place at the end of the line, deliberately making herself look smaller and more insignificant than she actually was. But she could feel Winter's eyes on her, studying her with that same intense scrutiny that had been growing more pronounced since the incident with Trevor. "Today we begin your most challenging training module," Winters announced, pacing in front of the assembled trainees with her hands clasped behind her back. "Urban combat in close quarters. This is where operators live or die. We're split second. Decisions determine mission success or catastrophic failure." A ripple of excitement went through the ranks. Urban combat training was one of the most anticipated modules at Evergreen, especially the building clearing exercises that took place in the Institute's state-of-the-art tactical village, a sprawling complex of structures designed to simulate everything from office buildings to apartment complexes to industrial facilities. "You will be divided into 4-person teams," Winters continued. "Each team will be given a specific objective within the tactical village. Some of you will be hostage rescue. Others will be evidence retrieval. Still others will be tasked with neutralizing high-value targets." She began listing off the team assignments, and Alexis wasn't surprised to hear her name called last. Assigned to a team with 3 of the lowest-performing trainees in the program. It was exactly what she had expected, another opportunity for the Institute's elite to watch her fail spectacularly. "Fletcher's team is going to get massacred," Stephanie whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. $10 says they don't last 5 minutes. "I'll take that bet," Connor replied with a smirk. "But I say 3 minutes max." Alexis kept her expression neutral, but internally she was calculating exactly how this would play out. The urban combat module would be her opportunity to begin the next phase of her mission, selectively revealing aspects of her true capabilities, while maintaining enough of her cover to avoid triggering immediate suspicion. The trainees were dismissed to gather their equipment, and Alexis headed toward the armory with her assigned teammates, Daniel Weber, a soft-spoken former college athlete who had never quite adjusted to the Institute's aggressive culture, Sarah Chun, a brilliant tactical analyst who struggled with the physical aspects of training, and Marcus Jackson, a former police officer who had the skills but lacked the killer instinct the instructors constantly demanded. "So," Daniel said awkwardly as they collected their training weapons, modified pistols and rifles that fired painful but non-lethal marking rounds. "Anyone have any experience with urban operations?" "I did some building searches when I was on the force," Marcus offered. "But nothing like what they're going to throw at us today." "I've studied the theoretical models," Sarah added, checking her weapon with precise but overly mechanical movements. "The key factors are entry point selection, movement synchronization, and field of fire discipline." They all looked at Alexis expectantly, waiting for her to admit her complete lack of relevant experience. Instead, she surprised them. "We should focus on playing to our strengths," she said quietly, her voice carrying none of the timidity they had come to expect from her. "Marcus has real-world experience. Sarah knows the tactical theory. Daniel has the best physical attributes. For point position." The three exchanged confused glances, startled by this unexpected show of confidence from the team's presumed weakest link. "And what about you?" Marcus asked, not unkindly. "What's your strength, Fletcher?" Alexis allowed herself a small smile. "I'm good at spotting details others miss." As they headed toward the tactical village for their briefing, Alexis could feel the weight of observation from multiple angles. Instructor Winters was watching her with that same laser-focused attention. Director Harrington stood on the observation platform with several other facility officials, all of them clearly expecting to witness another humiliating failure. And somewhere in the shadows, Alexis knew, her Shadow Protocol teammates were monitoring everything, ready to act if the situation demanded it. Their team was assigned a hostage rescue mission, one of the most difficult scenarios in the training rotation. They would need to infiltrate a 3-story office building, locate and extract 2 hostages, training dummies positioned somewhere in the structure, and reach the extraction point, all while facing an unknown number of hostile instructors, armed with the same training weapons. "Remember," Instructor Bradley said as he handed them their mission parameters, his eyes lingering on Alexis with barely disguised contempt. "In a real-world situation, failure means dead hostages. Don't embarrass yourselves more than necessary." "We won't, sir," Marcus replied stiffly, clearly offended by the instructor's tone. As they huddled to discuss their approach, Alexis could hear Stephanie and Connor making bets with other trainees about how quickly their team would be eliminated. The general consensus seemed to be that they wouldn't even make it past the ground floor. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking," Marcus began, unfolding a schematic of the target building. "Standard entry through the main door, Daniel on point, Sarah. Covering our 6, Alexis and I in the middle since we're the smallest targets." Alexis studied the schematic for a moment, then shook her head. "That's exactly what they'll be expecting. They'll have the main entrance heavily covered. You have a better idea?" Sarah asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Alexis pointed to a service entrance on the side of the building. "This door leads to a maintenance corridor that connects to the central stairwell. It's a blind spot in most security setups because it's typically used by cleaning staff, not regular personnel." Marcus frowned. "How do you know that?" "I used to work as a janitor during high school," Alexis lied smoothly. "Office buildings all have the same basic layout for maintenance access. It was a plausible explanation, and her teammates seemed to accept it without question. In reality, Alexis had memorized the tactical village layouts during her mission preparation, including all the structural vulnerabilities and defensive blind spots. "Okay, we'll try your way," Marcus decided, surprising the others with his willingness to listen to the team's presumed weakest member. "But once we're inside, we stick to standard operating procedure." Alexis nodded meekly, once again playing the role of the grateful subordinate. "Whatever you think is best." As they approached the tactical village, Alexis could feel the familiar calm settling over her, the absolute focus that came before combat operations. For weeks, she had been playing the role of the incompetent recruit, deliberately failing at every task, making herself the perfect target for the Institute's culture of cruelty. But now, as she checked her weapon with practiced efficiency, that she was careful to hide from observing eyes, Alexis Fletcher prepared to show just enough of her true capabilities to advance her mission without completely blowing her cover. The real game was about to begin. The urban tactical village glimmered with morning dew, a sprawling complex of structures designed to simulate every possible combat environment an operator might face in the field. 3 distinct buildings dominated the landscape: an office complex, an apartment building, and what appeared to be an industrial warehouse. Each had been meticulously constructed to provide the most realistic training environment possible, complete with functioning doors, breakable windows, and interior layouts identical to their real-world counterparts. A light mist hung over the grounds as Team 4, officially the lowest-ranked squad at Evergreen, approached their designated starting position. From the observation platform, Director Harrington watched through high-powered binoculars, his face a mask of professional disinterest that barely concealed his actual intentions. Beside him stood several senior instructors, including Winters, whose gray eyes never left Alexis Fletcher's small form as she moved with her teammates. "This should be entertaining," Instructor Bradley remarked, checking his watch with obvious anticipation. "I've positioned 6 of our best combat instructors throughout the office building. They'll be lucky to make it past the lobby." "Team 4, you have your mission parameters," announced the exercise controller through the facility's speaker system. "Infiltrate the target building, locate and extract 2 hostages, reach the extraction point. Exercise begins in 30 seconds. Alexis took a deep breath, mentally shifting into a different gear, not fully revealing her true capabilities, but allowing enough of her training to show through to begin altering perceptions. The success of her mission depended on a delicate balance, demonstrating just enough skill to gain access to more sensitive areas of the Institute without triggering immediate suspicion. "Remember," she whispered to her teammates as they took position near the service entrance she had identified. "Move quietly, check corners, and communicate with hand signals only." Marcus gave her a curious look, surprised by the sudden confidence in her voice, but nodded in agreement. Daniel and Sarah followed suit, both of them unconsciously responding to the natural authority Alexis was now projecting. "Exercise commences." "Now," blared the announcement, and the training scenario erupted into immediate action. While the other teams charged directly toward their objectives, Stephanie's squad heading for the apartment complex, Connor's for the warehouse team. 4 moved with deliberate stealth toward the office building's service entrance. No dramatic rush, no tactical blunders, just methodical movement that kept them out of the most obvious lines of sight. "What are they doing?" Bradley muttered on the observation platform, frowning as he tracked their unexpected approach through his binoculars. "That's not in the standard training protocol." Winters said nothing, but her eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she watched Alexis guide her team with subtle gestures and quiet confidence that seemed completely at odds with her previous performances. At the service entrance, Marcus prepared to take point position, but Alexis gently touched his arm and shook her head. Instead of explaining verbally and risking detection, she held up 3 fingers, pointed to her eyes. then to the hinges of the door. After a moment of confusion, understanding dawned on Marcus's face. She was pointing out that the door might be under observation from 3 potential angles. Rather than risk a frontal approach, Alexis motioned for Sarah to retrieve something. From her pack, a small compact mirror the analytical trainee used for personal grooming. With practiced efficiency that she no longer bothered to hide, Alexis used the mirror to check around corners and through the narrow window of the service door, confirming that the corridor beyond was clear. In the observation booth, Director Harrington leaned forward with sudden interest. "Where did Fletcher learn that technique?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of suspicion. "That's not something we teach until advanced infiltration modules." "Perhaps she's been studying ahead," Winters replied, her tone neutral but her expression thoughtful. Team 4 entered the building with surprising effectiveness, moving in a tight formation that maximized their coverage while minimizing their exposure. Daniel on point, Sarah watching their backs, with Marcus and Alexis covering the flanks. No wasted movement, no unnecessary noise, nothing that would give away their position to the instructors lying in wait. The maintenance corridor led them directly to the central stairwell, bypassing the lobby where, as Alexis had correctly predicted, 3 instructors were positioned for an ambush. From the first-floor security desk, they could hear frustrated radio chatter as the instructors realized their quarry had somehow circumvented their carefully planned trap. "First floor. Clear," Marcus whispered, clearly impressed by their progress. "Where to next?" Alexis pointed upward, then held up 2 fingers. "Second floor." In her briefing materials, she had memorized the most likely locations for hostage placement, and the second-floor conference rooms were prime candidates, defensible spaces with limited access points that would force rescuers into choke points. As they ascended the stairs, Alexis felt a familiar tension in her shoulders, the sensation of being watched by more than just the official observers. Somewhere in this facility, her shadow protocol partners were monitoring the exercise, waiting to see if her carefully calibrated performance would yield the necessary results. The second floor proved more challenging. As they emerged from the stairwell, a training instructor immediately opened fire from a concealed position behind a reception desk. Daniel reacted too slowly and took a marking round to the shoulder. In a real operation, a potentially fatal wound. Before the instructor could target the others, however, Alexis moved with fluid grace, pulling Daniel to safety while simultaneously returning fire with precision that seemed impossible for someone of her supposed skill level. Her first shot caught the instructor squarely in the center of his protective mask, a perfect headshot that would have been instantly fatal in actual combat. The man froze in surprise, clearly not expecting such accuracy from the Institute's most notorious failure. "Nice shot," Marcus whispered, his expression a mixture of shock and newfound respect. Alexis immediately downplayed her success, forcing an expression of stunned disbelief onto her face. "I got lucky," she mumbled, but she could see that her teammates were already re-evaluating their assumptions about her. In the observation booth, the reaction was even more pronounced. "That was no lucky shot," Bradley hissed, rewinding the video. "Feed to watch the sequence again." That was a textbook close-quarters combat response. Immediate threat assessment, target acquisition, and neutralization. Where the hell did she learn that? Winters remained silent, her weathered face revealing nothing of her thoughts as she continued to study Alexis's movements with laser-focused attention. Team 4 proceeded through the second floor with growing confidence, their dynamics shifting subtly as they unconsciously began to follow Alexis's lead rather than Marcus's. They located the first hostage in a conference room, exactly where Alexis had predicted, and extracted the training dummy with remarkable efficiency. 15 minutes into the exercise, and Team 4 has secured their first objective, announced the controller, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. This is the furthest this team has progressed in any tactical simulation to date. On the observation platform, Stephanie and Connor had returned from their own exercises, both teams, eliminated within the first 10 minutes, and were watching the monitors with growing disbelief as Team 4 continued to perform well beyond expectations. "This is impossible," Stephanie muttered, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. "They must be cheating somehow. Or maybe Fletcher isn't what she appears to be," Winters said quietly, speaking for the first time since the exercise began. The real test came on the 3rd floor, where the exercise controllers had positioned their most challenging obstacles. 3 instructors with combat experience, a complex maze of cubicles offering multiple ambush points, and the second hostage placed in the most difficult extraction location, the executive office at the far end of the floor. As Team 4 emerged from the stairwell, they were immediately met with a barrage of fire that forced them back into cover. Sarah took a hit to the leg, and Marcus narrowly avoided being eliminated by ducking behind a filing cabinet at the last second. "We're pinned down," Daniel whispered, his voice edged with the familiar panic of someone facing overwhelming odds. "There's no way through." Alexis assessed the situation with the calculating precision of a professional operative. She could easily neutralize all 3 instructors with her true skill set, but doing so would completely blow her cover. Instead, she needed to find a solution that would appear innovative, but not impossible for someone of her supposed background. "The ceiling," she said suddenly, pointing upward to the acoustic tiles above them. "Standard office construction uses suspended ceilings with maintenance access throughout the building." Marcus looked skeptical. "You want us to crawl through the ceiling?" "Just me," Alexis replied, already formulating her plan. "I'm the smallest. I can move through the ceiling space, come down behind them, create a distraction while you 3 advance from this position." It was a risky strategy that would never work in a real combat situation. The ceiling wouldn't support a person's weight, and the noise would alert any competent hostiles. But in a training exercise with predetermined rules, it exploited a loophole that the instructors hadn't anticipated. Before her teammates could object, Alexis had already pulled herself up into the ceiling space, moving with a grace and upper body strength that seemed completely at odds with her previous physical performances. Once above the tiles, she navigated by sound, following the hushed conversation of the instructors as they maintained their ambush position. In the observation booth, the exercise controllers scrambled to determine if this maneuver was even allowed under the simulation rules. "Is she permitted to do that?" Harrington demanded, his face flushed with anger. "That's not a standard tactical approach. There's nothing in the guidelines that specifically prohibits it," Winters replied, a hint of admiration creeping into her voice. "It shows initiative and unconventional thinking, exactly what we claim to value in our operators." Above the 3rd floor, Alexis moved with practiced silence, carefully distributing her weight across the metal framework supporting the ceiling tiles. When she reached a position directly above one of the instructors, she deliberately created a small noise, just enough to draw attention upward. The distraction worked perfectly. As the instructors glanced toward the ceiling, Marcus led Daniel and Sarah in a coordinated advance, catching their opponents in a textbook crossfire. Within seconds, they had neutralized 2 of the 3 instructors, while Alexis dropped down from the ceiling behind the 3rd, tapping him on the shoulder with her training weapon in a move that signaled a clean kill. "That was—" the instructor began, his voice filled with disbelief as he removed his protective mask. "Unorthodox but effective." "Well done, Fletcher." Alexis ducked her head modestly, but she could feel the shift in the air, the first cracks appearing in her carefully constructed persona of incompetence. It was a calculated risk, but one necessary for the next phase of her mission. Team 4 secured the second hostage and began their extraction, moving with the coordinated precision of a unit that had suddenly found its rhythm. As they approached the extraction point, a helipad on the roof of the building, they encountered no further resistance. reaching their objective with 12 minutes remaining on the exercise clock. "Exercise complete," announced the controller, unable to hide the astonishment in his voice. Team 4 has successfully accomplished all mission objectives with a final time of 18 minutes and 23 seconds. In the debriefing area, the other trainees watched in stunned silence as Team 4 emerged victorious, their previously mocked teammates now walking with the confidence of proven operators. Daniel, Sarah, and Marcus surrounded Alexis, their faces animated as they recounted their unexpected success. "That ceiling move was brilliant," Sarah gushed, her analytical mind already processing the tactical implications. "Completely unconventional but perfectly executed. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Daniel asked, still amazed by Alexis's perfect headshot on the first instructor. "I thought you nearly failed the marksmanship qualification." Alexis maintained her humble demeanor, but allowed just enough confidence to show through to cement this new perception. "My uncle taught me the basics when I was younger," she explained with a half-truth. "I guess something finally clicked today." As the team celebrated their unexpected victory, Alexis felt Instructor Winter's eyes on her, that same penetrating stare that had been following her for weeks, now filled with something that looked suspiciously like recognition. The instructor approached slowly, her weathered face giving nothing away as she came to stand before Alexis. The other trainees fell silent, expecting another public humiliation for the Institute's former failure. Instead, Winters extended her hand. "Good work today, Fletcher. That was impressive problem-solving under pressure." Alexis accepted the handshake, careful to make her grip appropriately firm, but not revealing the true strength in her deceptively small hands. "Thank you, Mom. I had good teammates." "Indeed," Winters replied, her eyes never leaving Alexis's face. "It's amazing what people can accomplish when given the right opportunity." The subtext was clear. Winters suspected something, but wasn't ready to voice her suspicions openly. Not yet. As the teams dispersed to clean their equipment, Director Harrington summoned Winters to a private conference. Alexis pretended not to notice, but her enhanced hearing, the result of specialized training and subtle surgical modifications, allowed her to catch fragments of their heated conversation, completely inconsistent with her previous performances. Background check might have missed something. Need to watch her closely. Perfect. The seeds of curiosity had been planted. Now Alexis needed to nurture them carefully, allowing just enough of her capabilities to show through to gain access to the secure areas of the facility where the real evidence would be found. That evening in the barracks, Alexis noticed an immediate change in how the other trainees treated her. The open mockery had transformed into cautious respect, with even Stephanie and Connor maintaining a wary distance rather than seeking new opportunities for humiliation. "I can't believe what happened today," Olivia said as they prepared for bed in their shared room. "You were like a completely different person out there." Alexis shrugged, maintaining her cover but with a new layer of confidence carefully added to the performance. "I just got tired of failing, I guess. Something inside me decided it was time to fight back." "Well, whatever it was," Olivia replied with genuine warmth, "it was amazing to watch. You should have seen Stephanie's face when your team completed the mission. I thought she was going to explode." After lights out, when the barracks had fallen silent and the night guards had completed their rounds, Alexis slipped from her bed. With practiced stealth, Olivia's steady breathing confirmed she was deeply asleep, giving Alexis the window she needed for her real work. Moving silently through the darkened facility, she made her way to the communication center, a restricted area that had previously been beyond her access. But her performance in today's exercise had earned her new privileges, including a temporary access card for additional training materials that Instructor Winters had surprisingly provided. The night guard, actually a shadow protocol operative, who had been embedded months before Alexis arrived, nodded slightly as she approached, his expression professionally blank as he verified her access card. "Studying late, Fletcher?" He asked for the benefit of the security cameras. "Yes, sir," she replied meekly. "Instructor Winters suggested I review some advanced tactical manuals after today's exercise." The guard waved her through, and Alexis entered the communications center with the outward appearance of a dedicated trainee seeking improvement. Once inside, however, her demeanor changed completely. Working with practiced efficiency, she connected a specialized device to the facility's secure server, a quantum infiltration tool that could bypass even the most sophisticated encryption without leaving digital footprints. Within minutes, she had accessed the Institute's classified communications, downloading evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond what she had initially suspected. It wasn't just Director Harrington and Instructor Bradley selling secrets to foreign governments. The corruption extended to multiple federal agencies, with Evergreen serving as the hub for a vast network of compromised officials, illicit intelligence trades, and even human trafficking operations disguised as special rendition programs. Most disturbing were the files related to Project Chimera, a program designed to identify, recruit, and if necessary, eliminate potential assets from within the student population. Trainees who showed particular promise were approached with offers to join the conspiracy. Those who refused simply disappeared, their absences explained away as training accidents or personal withdrawals. Trevor Reynolds hadn't been the only foreign agent embedded at Evergreen. There were at least a dozen others, some from hostile governments, others from private military corporations with their own agendas. The Institute had become a battleground for competing interests, with the trainees caught in the crossfire. As Alexis finished downloading the evidence, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, too heavy for the night guard, too purposeful for a random patrol. Someone was coming directly to the communications center, someone who moved with the confident stride of authority. Alexis disconnected her device and quickly positioned herself at one of the computer terminals, pulling up a tactical manual that would support her cover story. Just as she settled into place, the door opened to reveal Instructor Winters, her gray eyes sharp with suspicion in the dim light. "Fletcher," she said, her voice neutral but with an undercurrent of tension. "It's quite late for studying." "Yes, ma'am," Alexis replied, infusing her voice with just the right amount of eager determination. "After today's exercise, I wanted to improve my understanding of urban combat techniques. I've never had access to such comprehensive materials before." Winters studied her for a long moment, her gaze so penetrating that Alexis wondered if her cover had finally been blown completely. "Today was quite a revelation," Winters said finally, moving to stand beside Alexis and glancing at the tactical manual displayed on the screen. "You demonstrated skills that most trainees don't develop until their final semester." "I got lucky, ma'am." "No," Winters replied firmly. "That wasn't luck. That was training. The question is, what kind of training? And from whom?" The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken questions and dangerous possibilities. Alexis maintained her innocent expression, but internally she was calculating escape routes, weapon options, and the probability of neutralizing Winters without alerting facility security. Then, to Alexis's surprise, Winters smiled, a small, tight expression that never reached her eyes. "Whatever it is, Fletcher, I think you've been holding back. And I want to see just how much." She placed a folder on the desk beside Alexis. "Tomorrow morning, 0500 hours. Report to the Advanced Combat Assessment Facility. You've been selected for specialized evaluation." As Winters turned to leave, she paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder with an expression Alexis couldn't quite interpret. "Don't disappoint me, Fletcher. I think we both know you're capable of much more than you've shown." After the instructor left, Alexis opened the folder and felt her pulse quicken as she scanned the contents. The Advanced Combat Assessment Facility, known informally as the Gauntlet, was Evergreen's most challenging training environment, a multi-building complex designed to push operators to their absolute limits. Most trainees never even qualified for access. Those who did typically faced it during their final month of training after years of preparation. And now Alexis had been scheduled for evaluation months ahead of the normal timeline, with a specific notation that caught her eye: Building Clearance Assessment, 3-structure sequential neutralization. It was the most difficult tactical challenge Evergreen offered, clearing 3 separate buildings of hostile forces in succession, with no breaks, no resupply, and no backup. Even experienced operators struggled to complete a single building successfully. 3 was considered nearly impossible, but it was also exactly the opportunity Alexis needed. Access to the Advanced Combat Assessment Facility meant access to the most restricted areas of the Institute, including the secured wing where Director Harrington conducted his most sensitive operations. As she made her way back to the barracks, Alexis allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The plan was working perfectly. By this time tomorrow, she would either have all the evidence she needed to expose the entire conspiracy, or she would be dead, her cover blown and her mission compromised beyond recovery. Either way, the charade of incompetence was finally coming to an end. It was time for Alexis Fletcher to show Evergreen Tactical Institute exactly what a shadow protocol operative could do when the gloves came off. Dawn broke over the Montana mountains like a blade, sharp golden light cutting through the lingering darkness as Alexis Fletcher stood before the Advanced Combat Assessment Facility. The complex rose from the mist like something out of a tactical operator's nightmare. 3 distinct structures of increasing complexity, surrounded by observation towers and encircled by a high fence topped with motion sensors and surveillance cameras. The Gauntlet, as trainees called it in hushed whispers, wasn't just a training ground. It was a proving ground, where careers were made or destroyed in the span of a single evaluation. Most candidates spent their entire time at Evergreen preparing for this challenge. Alexis was facing it after just 2 months, with no official preparation and a growing suspicion that this wasn't merely a tactical assessment, it was a trap. From the shadows of the nearest observation tower emerged Instructor Winters, her weathered face revealing nothing as she approached with a tablet containing the assessment parameters. Behind her came Director Harrington, his expression a mixture of suspicion and barely concealed anticipation. They were joined by a small group of senior instructors, including Bradley, whose eyes never left Alexis as they gathered around her. "Fletcher," Winters said by way of greeting, her voice carefully neutral, "are you prepared for your assessment?" Alexis nodded, keeping her expression appropriately nervous but determined, the look of someone who had discovered hidden reserves of courage but still doubted their own capabilities. "Yes, ma'am. I studied the protocols all night." "Good," Harrington interjected, his tone carrying an edge that hadn't been present in previous interactions. "Because this will be the most demanding evaluation you've ever faced." The unspoken message was clear. This was designed to break her, to force her to reveal her true capabilities or fail so spectacularly that any suspicions about her would be permanently laid to rest. Winters handed her the tablet, and Alexis scanned the mission parameters with growing internal alarm. This wasn't just difficult, it was virtually impossible by normal standards. 3 buildings, 36 hostiles armed with training weapons. That would deliver incapacitating electrical shocks rather than simply marking hits. No backup, limited ammunition, and a time constraint of 30 minutes for the entire operation, a record that had never been achieved in the facility's history. "The current record is 47 minutes, Bradley added, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. Set by a former Navy SEAL with 15 years of combat experience. And he only cleared 2 buildings, another instructor chimed in with a smirk. The third has never been fully cleared within the time parameters. Alexis maintained her determined expression while internally calculating her options. This was clearly designed as a no-win scenario. Either she failed miserably, confirming her persona as an unqualified recruit who had one lucky day, or she succeeded too well and confirmed their suspicions that she was something far more dangerous. Then she appeared. But there was a third option, one that required perfect calibration of her performance. Show enough skill to gain access to the restricted areas near the third building, but not so much that she triggered immediate containment protocols. The assessment begins in 5 minutes, Winters announced, gesturing toward the equipment table, where Alexis's weapons and tactical gear waited. Standard loadout. No special equipment. As Alexis checked her gear, a training pistol, a modified assault rifle, and basic body armor, she could feel the weight of observation from multiple angles. Not just the official observers, but also her Shadow Protocol teammates who would be monitoring remotely and preparing to extract her if the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. The facility's speaker system crackled to life. Assessment commences in 60 seconds. Candidate Fletcher, proceed to starting position. Alexis moved to the marked position outside the first building, a 2-story structure designed to simulate a residential home that had been converted into a hostile stronghold. According to the briefing, it contained 12 armed opponents positioned throughout the building, with unknown patterns and defensive setups. "Good luck, Fletcher," Harrington called out, his voice carrying a note of anticipation that sent chills down Alexis's spine. "You're going to need it." The countdown reached 0, and a horn blared across the complex, signaling the start of the assessment. In that moment, Alexis made her decision. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less than she was. It was time to show Evergreen exactly what they were dealing with, but on her terms, with precisely calibrated revelations of her capabilities. She moved toward the first building, not with the hesitant approach of a trainee, but with the fluid confidence of a seasoned operator. Her posture shifted subtly, center of gravity lowering, muscles coiling with predatory readiness. The transformation was so complete that she heard audible gasps from the observation team. Rather than approaching the front door, the obvious entry point that would certainly be covered by multiple hostiles, Alexis circled to a side window that provided a partial view of the interior. With practiced efficiency, she used her tactical mirror to check for threats, identifying 2 instructors positioned to cover the main entrance and a third patrolling the ground floor. In a real operation, she would have simply eliminated them with surgical precision. For this assessment, she needed to be more creative, demonstrating exceptional skill. Without revealing the full extent of her lethal training, Alexis used a technique taught only to advanced infiltration specialists, tapping the window frame in a pattern that mimicked the building's natural settling sounds, gradually increasing in volume until one of the instructors moved to investigate. As he approached the window, she struck with lightning speed, using the butt of her rifle to deliver a precision blow that would incapacitate without causing permanent injury. 1 down, 35 to go. With the first hostile neutralized, Alexis entered through the window with silent efficiency, moving through the building like a ghost. Her awareness expanded to encompass every creak of floorboards, every subtle shift in air pressure that might indicate movement. She didn't just clear rooms, she flowed through them, neutralizing threats before they even registered her presence. In the observation tower, the mood shifted from smug anticipation to growing concern as they watched. Alexis moved through the first building with impossible speed and precision. "That's not standard Institute training," Bradley muttered, his face paling as Alexis eliminated 3 more hostiles in rapid succession without taking a single hit. Where the hell did she learn to move like that? Winters said nothing, her expression unreadable as she watched the assessment unfold on the monitors. Beside her, Harrington's face had hardened into a mask of cold calculation, his earlier suspicions clearly confirmed by what he was witnessing. Inside the building, Alexis continued her methodical clearing operation, her movements a perfect balance between revealing enough skill to be impressive, without demonstrating the full lethal capability of a shadow protocol operative. She took a deliberate hit on her left arm, a calculated sacrifice that would make her performance seem human rather than superhuman, but continued without breaking stride, adapting her technique to compensate for the simulated injury. 7 minutes into the assessment, Alexis emerged from the first building, all 12 hostiles neutralized with an efficiency that left the observers in stunned silence. Without pausing for breath, she moved immediately toward the second structure, a 3-story office building with more complex architecture and 16 additional opponents. She cleared the first building in 7 minutes and 22 seconds. One of the technicians announced, his voice tinged with disbelief. That's nearly 3 minutes faster than the previous record." Harrington's knuckles whitened as he gripped the railing of the observation platform. "Initiate security. Protocol 3, he whispered to Bradley. "I want containment teams on standby." The second building presented greater challenges, multiple entry points, complex interior layouts, and opponents who had been alerted by her performance in the first structure. They were waiting for her now, their defensive positions reinforced, and their tactics adjusted to counter her demonstrated capabilities. Alexis approached this challenge differently, using the building's environmental systems to her advantage. During her previous infiltrations of the facility, she had memorized the ventilation layouts, electrical systems, and structural weaknesses of all 3 assessment buildings. Now she put that knowledge to use, triggering a controlled power disruption that plunged certain sections into darkness while leaving others illuminated, creating confusion and forcing the defenders to adapt to changing conditions. In the shadowed corridors of the second floor, she encountered Instructor Garcia, one of the facility's most experienced combat trainers. Unlike the others, he recognized the level of skill he was facing and adjusted accordingly, setting an ambush that would have trapped a normal operator. Alexis sensed the trap moments before triggering it, her enhanced awareness detecting subtle changes in air pressure and the nearly imperceptible sound of controlled breathing. Instead of walking into the ambush, she created a distraction by firing at a light fixture down the corridor, sending glass raining down and forcing Garcia to shift position. The moment he moved, Alexis struck, not with lethal force as she had been trained, but with precisely calibrated, incapacitating blows that showcased exceptional skill while remaining within the boundaries of what an extremely gifted but conventionally trained operator might accomplish. 14 minutes and 35 seconds. The technician updated as Alexis cleared the second building, her pace slowing slightly due to the increased complexity, but still well ahead of any previous record. All 16 hostiles neutralized. No misidentification errors. Tactical efficiency rating at 97%. In the observation tower, the mood had shifted from concern to alarm. This was no longer about evaluating a trainee. This was about containing a potential security breach of the highest order. "She's heading for the third building," Winters observed, her tone carefully neutral despite the tension evident in her posture. No one has ever cleared all 3 within the time limit. The third structure was the true challenge, a multi-level industrial complex with maze-like corridors, multiple dead ends, and defensive positions that had been designed by Special Forces veterans to be virtually impenetrable. 8 heavily armed instructors waited inside, all of them now fully aware that they were facing something far beyond a normal trainee. As Alexis approached the final building, she could see containment teams taking up positions around the perimeter of the assessment area, tactical operators in full gear, armed not with training weapons, but with actual firearms loaded with tranquilizer rounds. Harrington was taking no chances, preparing to capture her the moment she completed the assessment or showed signs of deviation from the assigned parameters. Perfect. Everything was. proceeding exactly according to plan. The third building required a different approach. Stealth and precision had served her well in the first two structures, but time was running short, and the defenders here were too well prepared for conventional tactics. It was time to demonstrate the advanced techniques that only the most elite operators were taught, but still carefully calibrated to suggest exceptional training rather than the classified enhancements of a shadow protocol operative. Alexis entered through the roof, using a maintenance ladder that most candidates overlooked in favor of ground-level access points. From this elevated position, she had a tactical advantage that allowed her to observe patrol patterns and identify vulnerabilities. In the defensive setup, what followed was a masterclass in close-quarters combat that left even the most experienced instructors in awe. Alexis moved through the building like a force of nature, her movements so fluid and precise that they seemed almost choreographed. She didn't just neutralize threats, she controlled the entire flow of the engagement, herding opponents into positions of disadvantage and eliminating them with an economy of motion that bordered on artistic. 23 minutes and 40 seconds, the technician announced, his voice barely above a whisper as Alexis cleared the third floor of the building, leaving only the secured basement level remaining. She's on pace to break the record by nearly 20 minutes. In the basement, the final four instructors had established a defensive perimeter that would have been impenetrable to conventional tactics. They had overturned furniture to create cover, positioned themselves with interlocking fields of fire, and prepared flashbang grenades to disorient anyone who managed to breach their position. Alexis paused at the top of the basement stairs, analyzing the situation with calculating precision. A frontal assault would be suicide. Stealth was impossible given the open layout and multiple observers. She needed a third option, something unexpected that would showcase exceptional creativity without revealing classified techniques. The solution came from an unlikely source, her memory of Olivia, mentioning that the third building had been constructed on the site of an old mining operation, with some of the original tunnels still accessible through a maintenance shaft. Instead of descending the stairs into the prepared ambush, Alexis backtracked to a utility room she had passed earlier, quickly locating the access panel that connected to the abandoned mining tunnels. With practiced efficiency, she removed the panel and slipped into the narrow passage beyond, navigating by touch through the darkness until she reached a point directly beneath the basement floor. From her position in the maintenance tunnel, Alexis could hear the instructors above her, their voices tense as they wondered why she hadn't appeared yet. They were expecting her to come down the stairs, the only approach that made tactical sense based on conventional training. But Alexis Fletcher wasn't conventionally trained. Using a technique taught only to the most elite infiltration specialists, she tapped on the pipes running along the tunnel ceiling, creating sound patterns that mimicked normal building operations, but gradually shifted position, giving the impression of movement where there was none. The distraction worked perfectly, drawing the instructor's attention away from their primary defensive focus. Then she made her move, emerging from a maintenance hatch in the corner of the basement that hadn't been used in years, coming up behind the defensive perimeter rather than charging into it. Before the instructors could react to her unexpected appearance, Alexis had already neutralized two of them with precision strikes that targeted pressure points rather than causing blunt trauma. The remaining two instructors turned to engage, but they were too late. Alexis moved through their defensive position like water flowing around rocks, her movements so fluid and precise that they seemed almost effortless. One moment she was across the room, the next she was between them, her training weapons delivering the simulated killing blows with surgical accuracy. "Exercise complete," announced the facility's automated system. "All targets neutralized. Time 26 minutes and 12 seconds. Alexis stood in the center of the basement, her breathing controlled and her posture relaxed despite having just completed the most demanding tactical challenge Evergreen had to offer. Around her lay the bodies of the final instructors, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to grudging respect. "Who are you really?" asked one of them, a veteran with 20 years of Special Forces experience. "Nobody clears the gauntlet like that. Nobody." Alexis smiled but said nothing as the facility doors opened and the assessment team entered, led by Director Harrington and Instructor Winters. Behind them came the containment team, their weapons held at the ready but not yet raised, waiting for orders that hadn't quite been given. "Congratulations, Fletcher," Harrington said, his voice carrying none of the warmth that might be expected after such an extraordinary performance. "You've just set a facility record that will likely stand for decades." "Thank you, sir," Alexis replied, maintaining her cover persona of the dedicated trainee who had finally found her confidence. "I just applied what I've learned here at Evergreen." "Bullshit," Bradley snapped, unable to contain himself. "None of what we just witnessed is taught in our curriculum. Not the movement patterns, not the tactical decision-making, not the combat techniques." His hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. "So I'll ask you directly, who are you, and what agency do you really work for?" The moment hung in the air, fraught with tension and dangerous possibilities. Alexis knew that her next words would determine whether she walked out of this facility under her own power or was taken into custody for intensive interrogation. Before she could respond, however, Winters stepped forward, positioning herself subtly between Alexis and the increasingly hostile Bradley. "I think we all need to take a moment and consider what we've just witnessed," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her one of Evergreen's most respected instructors. "Fletcher has demonstrated exceptional aptitude under the most demanding conditions possible. Rather than treating that as a threat, perhaps we should recognize it as an opportunity." Harrington's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "An opportunity for what exactly?" "For learning," Winters replied simply. "Isn't that what we claim to value above all else at this institute? The pursuit of excellence in tactical operations, regardless of its source." The standoff continued for several tense seconds, neither side willing to back down from their position. Finally, Harrington made a small gesture, and the containment team lowered their weapons slightly, not standing down completely, but reducing the immediate threat level. "My office, 10 minutes, he said curtly. "Fletcher, Winters, both of you, the rest of you, secure the assessment area and prepare detailed reports on everything you observed." As the group dispersed, Winters remained beside Alexis, neither of them speaking until they were relatively alone in the corridor leading back to the main facility. "That was quite a performance," Winters said finally, her voice pitched low enough that only Alexis could hear. "Almost too perfect." "I got lucky," Alexis replied, maintaining her cover out of habit, even though she suspected it was already compromised beyond recovery. Winters smiled, a small knowing expression that carried volumes of unspoken understanding. "We both know. That wasn't luck, Lieutenant Fletcher. Or should I call you by your operational designation?" Alexis felt her blood run cold. Winters knew. Somehow she knew exactly who and what she was dealing with. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." "Of course you don't," Winters replied with the same knowing smile. "Just like I don't know anything about Shadow Protocol or why they would send one of their most valuable operatives to infiltrate a seemingly ordinary tactical training facility." They had reached the administration building now, the director's office just ahead of them. Before they entered, Winters paused, turning to face Alexis directly. "Whatever happens in there," she said quietly, "remember that not everyone at Evergreen is your enemy. Some of us have been waiting a very long time for someone like you to arrive." Before Alexis could process this cryptic statement, the door opened to reveal Director Harrington standing behind his desk, his expression grim and his posture rigid with barely contained tension. "Come in," he said, gesturing to the chairs positioned before his desk. "We have much to discuss." As they entered, Alexis noticed several details that immediately raised her internal threat assessment. The office blinds had been closed, the security cameras disabled, and a signal jammer activated to prevent electronic surveillance. Whatever was about to happen in this room, Harrington clearly didn't want it recorded or witnessed by anyone outside his immediate control. "I'll be direct," he said once they were seated, his voice cold and precise. The performance we just witnessed was not that of a trainee who got lucky or found sudden inspiration. It was the work of a highly trained operative with years of specialized experience. His eyes fixed on Alexis with laser intensity. "Who sent you? And what is your actual mission?" Alexis maintained her cover, allowing just the right amount of confusion and indignation to show on her face. "Sir, I don't understand. I just applied the techniques I've been learning here." "Stop!" Harrington cut her off sharply. "We're well past that now. No trainee clears all 3 buildings in 26 minutes. It's not just improbable, it's impossible without specialized training that goes far beyond anything we teach here." He leaned forward, his expression hardening further. "So I'll ask again, and I expect an honest answer this time. Who are you working for? CIA? FBI? Some black ops program the Pentagon doesn't admit exists?" The moment had come for Alexis to make her final decision: maintain her increasingly implausible cover, or pivot to a new approach that might allow her to complete her mission despite the compromised situation. Before she could respond, however, Winters spoke up, her voice carrying a weight and authority that seemed to fill the room. "She's one of mine, James." Both Alexis and Harrington turned to stare at Winters, equal shock on their faces, though for entirely different reasons. "What did you say?" Harrington demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I said she's one of mine," Winters repeated calmly. "Internal Affairs has been investigating Evergreen for nearly a year. Fletcher is part of a deep cover operation, authorized at the highest levels of the federal government." Alexis kept her expression carefully neutral, but her mind was racing to process this unexpected development. Internal Affairs? Was Winters actually part of the oversight division responsible for monitoring ethical compliance within federal agencies? Or was this some elaborate counterplay designed to expose Alexis's true affiliation? Harrington's face had lost all color, his earlier confidence replaced by a calculating wariness that made him look suddenly older and more dangerous. "You expect me to believe that Internal Affairs sent an operative with that level of training? For what possible reason?" "Because we've had 15 trainees disappear from this facility in the past 3 years," Winters replied, her voice hard as steel. 15 promising candidates who asked the wrong questions or saw things they shouldn't have. All of them written off as training accidents or voluntary withdrawals. She reached into her jacket and produced an official-looking credential that Alexis couldn't quite see from her position. Whatever it was, it caused Harrington to sink slowly back into his chair, the blood draining from his face. "We know about Project Chimera," Winters continued, pressing her advantage. "We know about the offshore accounts, the intelligence sales, all of it. What we didn't have was enough concrete evidence to move against an operation this deeply embedded within federal infrastructure." She gestured toward Alexis. "Until now." The office fell silent as Harrington processed this information, his eyes darting between the 2 women as he calculated his remaining options. Alexis remained perfectly still, ready to move the instant the situation deteriorated into violence. Finally, Harrington's expression shifted to one of grim resignation. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said quietly. "This goes so much higher than you can imagine. People will die if you pursue this." "People have already died," Winters replied, her voice carrying genuine emotion for the first time. "Good people. Trainees who deserved better than to be exploited and discarded by the very institution that was supposed to prepare them for service." She stood, her posture radiating absolute authority. James Harrington, you are hereby relieved of duty pending a full investigation into your activities as director of this facility. Surrender your credentials and any weapons immediately." The tension in the room reached breaking point as Harrington stared at them, his hand hovering near the drawer where Alexis knew he kept a personal sidearm. For a moment, it seemed he might choose violence over surrender. Then, with a movement so sudden it was almost a blur, he yanked open the drawer and grabbed for his weapon. But Alexis was already moving, her shadow protocol training taking over with devastating efficiency. Before his hand could close around the grip of his pistol, she had crossed the distance between them, disarmed him with a precision strike to his wrist, and pinned him face down on the desk with his arm twisted behind his back in a control hold that allowed no possibility of resistance. "That was a poor decision, Director," she said calmly, applying just enough pressure to his joint to ensure compliance without causing permanent injury. From the doorway came the sound of multiple footsteps as security personnel entered the office. Not Harrington's loyalists, but a team Alexis recognized immediately as fellow Shadow Protocol operatives, though they wore the uniforms and credentials of federal marshals. "Director James Harrington," announced the lead agent, "you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, illegal arms trafficking, and multiple counts of homicide. You have the right to remain silent." As the marshals took custody of Harrington, Alexis turned to face Winters, who was watching the proceedings with an expression of grim satisfaction. "Internal affairs?" Alexis asked quietly, one professional to another. Winters smiled, a genuine expression this time, reaching her eyes and softening the hard planes of her weathered face. "Not exactly. Let's just say that Shadow Protocol isn't the only specialized unit operating within the federal infrastructure." She extended her hand. "It's been an honor watching you work, Lieutenant Fletcher. Your reputation is well deserved." As they shook hands, a mutual respect passing between them that went beyond words, the facility's speaker system came to life with an announcement that sent a wave of shock through the entire institute. "Attention all personnel. This facility is now under federal jurisdiction. All training activities are suspended, pending a complete review of operations. All trainees are to report to the main auditorium immediately for important information regarding their status and future assignments." 3 months later, Alexis Fletcher stood at attention in the newly reformed Evergreen Tactical Institute's graduation ceremony, wearing the crisp dress uniform of an honor graduate. The transformation of both the operative and the institution was remarkable. Gone were the corrupt leadership and toxic culture that had pervaded the facility for years. In their place stood a new command structure, headed by Senior Instructor Emily Winters, now promoted to Director with a mandate to rebuild Evergreen into the ethical, effective training center it was always meant to be. The auditorium was filled with trainees, most of whom still had no idea of the true nature of the events that had transformed their institution. To them, the sudden leadership change and restructuring had been explained as a routine federal oversight intervention. Only a select few knew the truth, that they had witnessed the successful conclusion of one of the most complex undercover operations in recent history. "Today we celebrate not just individual achievement," Winters began, addressing the assembled graduates, "but a renewed commitment to the principles that should have guided this institution from the beginning: integrity, excellence, and service to something greater than ourselves." In the front row, Olivia Martinez sat beside Sarah Chun, Daniel Weber, and Marcus Jackson, Alexis's former teammates who had unknowingly played crucial roles in her mission. All of them now knew portions of the truth, sworn to secrecy, but honored to have been part of something so important. "Among today's graduates," Winters continued, "we have individuals who have demonstrated exceptional courage, perseverance, and tactical brilliance. None more so than Cadet Alexis Fletcher, whose performance in the Advanced Combat Assessment set a facility record that will likely stand for generations. As Alexis stepped forward to receive her honors, the auditorium erupted in applause, led by the very same trainees who had once mocked and belittled her during her days of deliberate failure. The irony wasn't lost on her, but neither was the genuine respect she now saw in their eyes. After the ceremony, as the graduates celebrated with their families and friends, Alexis found a quiet moment alone with Winters on the observation deck overlooking the training grounds. "What happens now?" she asked, watching the sunset paint the Montana mountains in shades of gold and crimson. "For Evergreen, a new beginning," Winters replied. "With the corruption excised and new oversight protocols in place, we can finally fulfill our true purpose, training the next generation of operators who will serve with both skill and honor." "And for me?" Winters smiled, understanding the real question behind the words. Shadow Protocol never officially acknowledges its operatives or operations. As far as the world is concerned, Alexis Fletcher graduated with honors and will move on to a distinguished career in federal service. She paused, her expression turning more serious. "But we both know that isn't how your story continues." Alexis nodded, already feeling the familiar pull of the next mission, the next cover identity, the next battlefield where shadows did the work that could never be acknowledged in the light. "Before you go," Winters said, "I want you to know something. What you did here didn't just expose a conspiracy or bring down corrupt officials. You saved lives, not just the trainees who would have disappeared in the future, but the countless civilians who will be protected by the honorable operators. We can now train properly." For once, Alexis allowed her true self to show through the carefully constructed personas she had worn for so long. Not the failing trainee, not the suddenly competent operator, but the dedicated professional who had chosen a life in the shadows, because she believed in protecting those who would never know her name. "That's why we do what we do," she said simply. "Not for recognition or rewards, but because someone has to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." As she walked away from Evergreen Tactical Institute for the final time, Alexis Fletcher carried with her not just the successful completion of another mission, but something far more valuable, the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that remain forever in the shadows, unsung but essential to the safety of a nation that would never know how close it had come to betrayal from within. The operative who had been mocked for her supposed lack of combat readiness had not only cleared 3 buildings with perfect accuracy, she had helped clear a path for integrity to flourish where corruption had once reigned. And in the world of shadows where Alexis Fletcher truly lived, there could be no greater achievement than that.